The first snowfall of the season blanketed Albany in a deceptive shroud of innocence. I watched from my study window as the last commuters hurried home, leaving Erie Boulevard eerily silent. The streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows across the pristine white landscape. It should have been beautiful, but all I felt was a creeping dread. Behind me, perched on my desk, sat the source of my growing madness, a porcelain doll with a painted smile that seemed to mock me. I'd bought it at an estate sale last month, thinking it would be the perfect birthday gift for my 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Now, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd invited something sinister into our home. "Daddy?" Lily's voice startled me. I turned to find her standing in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. "Can you check under my bed again?" I think I heard something. I forced a smile, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. "Of course, sweetie. Let's go take a look." As we walked down the hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath our feet, I couldn't shake the sensation of eyes boring into the back of my skull. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the doll perched at the end of the hall. There was nothing there, of course. Just shadows and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs. Lily's room was a pink paradise, walls adorned with unicorn posters and strings of fairy lights. It should have been a safe haven, but as I knelt to check under the bed, I felt exposed, vulnerable. My heart raced as I lifted the dust ruffle, half expecting to see glassy eyes staring back at me. "See, honey?" "Nothing there," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Just Mr. Whiskers." I pulled out her cat's favorite toy mouse, earning a giggle from Lily. As I tucked her in, I noticed something on her nightstand that made my blood run cold. The doll sat there, its painted eyes seeming to follow my every move. I could have sworn I'd left it in my study. "Lily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "did you bring the doll in here?" She looked at me, confusion clouding her eyes. "No, Daddy. You put her there when you gave her to me, remember?" A chill ran down my spine. I didn't remember doing any such thing, but surely I must have. The alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. "Right, of course," I lied, planting a kiss on her forehead. "Sweet dreams, princess." As I turned off the light and closed her door, I could have sworn I saw the doll's head turn slightly, its smile widening in the darkness. I shook my head, trying to clear the impossible image from my mind. Back in my study, I poured myself a generous glass of whiskey, hoping to calm my frayed nerves. The house creaked and settled around me, each sound making me jump. I found myself staring at the empty spot on my desk where the doll had been, trying to remember when I'd moved it to Lily's room. My wife, Sarah, found me there hours later, the empty glass dangling from my fingertips as I stared into the middle distance. "Tom," she said, her voice laced with concern. "It's past midnight. Are you coming to bed?" I looked up at her, seeing the worry etched on her face. How could I explain the irrational fear that had taken hold of me? That I was terrified of a child's toy? "I'll be up in a minute," I promised. "Just finishing some work." She hesitated, clearly not believing me, but nodded and headed upstairs. As soon as she was gone, I opened my laptop and began researching the history of the estate where I'd bought the doll. There had to be an explanation for the unease I felt, some dark secret that would make sense of the madness creeping into the edges of my mind. Hours passed as I fell down a rabbit hole of local legends and unsolved mysteries. The Schuyler mansion, where the estate sale had been held, had a long and bloody history. Whispers of curses, of objects imbued with malevolent spirits. It all sounded like superstitious nonsense, but with each passing minute, I found myself believing. A floorboard creaked behind me, and I spun around, heart pounding. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw a small figure darting into the shadows. But when I blinked, there was nothing there. "Get a grip, Tom," I muttered to myself, running a shaky hand through my hair. "You're letting your imagination run wild." But as I turned back to my computer, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. On the screen was an old photograph from the Schuyler Mansion, dated 1923. In it, a little girl sat on an ornate chair, holding a doll with an eerily familiar smile. The same doll that now sat in my daughter's room, watching over her as she slept. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. This was insane. Dolls didn't move on their own. They didn't have histories or agendas. I was a rational man, a successful lawyer. I dealt in facts and evidence, not ghost stories and curses. And yet, as I climbed the stairs to join my sleeping wife, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that somewhere in the darkness of our home, behind that painted smile, something was waiting, plotting, hungry. As I passed Lily's room, I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I should check on her, make sure she was safe. But the thought of seeing that doll again, of meeting its glassy stare in the dim glow of her nightlight, made me recoil. Tomorrow, I whispered to myself, I'll deal with this tomorrow. But as I crawled into bed beside Sarah, her steady breathing usually a comfort, all I could think about was that smile. That damn painted smile that seemed to grow wider with each passing hour. And as I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow might be too late. If you are enjoying it, please help the channel by subscribing and leaving a like. I awoke with a start, heart pounding, sheets drenched in cold sweat. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed an angry red. 3:33 a.m. Sarah slept peacefully beside me, oblivious to the terror that gripped my soul. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, a silhouette at the foot of our bed made my blood run cold. It was small, child-sized, but unnaturally still. I blinked hard, praying it was just a trick of the shadows. But when I opened my eyes, it was still there, and it was smiling. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice hoarse with fear. "Sarah, wake up." She stirred, mumbling incoherently. By the time she opened her eyes, the figure was gone. Had it ever been there at all? "Tom? What's wrong?" she asked, concern etching her features. I couldn't find the words to explain. How could I tell her that I was losing my mind over a doll? That I was seeing things that couldn't possibly be real? Nothing, I lied, forcing a smile. Just a bad dream. Go back to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. I lay there, rigid with fear, listening to the house settle around us. Every creak, every groan of the old wood sounded like footsteps, like something small and malevolent creeping through the halls. When the first light of dawn finally crept through the curtains, I felt a momentary relief. Surely, in the light of day, these nocturnal terrors would fade like mist in the morning sun. How wrong I was. I shuffled downstairs, desperate for coffee to clear the fog from my mind. As I rounded the corner into the kitchen, I froze. There, sitting at the breakfast table, was the doll. Its glassy eyes seemed to follow me as I approached, that painted smile wider than ever. "This isn't happening," I muttered, squeezing my eyes shut. "This isn't real." But when I opened them, the doll was still there. And now I noticed something that made my skin crawl. A small piece of paper was clutched in its porcelain hand. With trembling fingers, I pried it loose. In childish scrawl, it read, "Let's play a game, Daddy." The room spun around me. I staggered back, the note falling from my nerveless fingers. This was impossible. Dolls didn't move. They didn't write notes. And yet, "Tom, are you okay?" Sarah's voice snapped me back to reality. She stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. I turned back to the table, ready to show her the evidence of my torment. But the doll was gone. The note had vanished. There was no trace that anything had been amiss. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Just didn't sleep well." Sarah's frown deepened. "Maybe you should take the day off. You've been working too hard lately." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. A day off, yes. A chance to get to the bottom of this madness. As soon as Sarah left for work and Lily for school, I began my investigation. I tore through the house, searching every nook and cranny for the doll. But it was nowhere to be found. Not in Lily's room, not in my study, not anywhere. Desperate for answers, I drove to the Schuyler mansion. The curator, an elderly woman named Mrs. Pendleton, greeted me with a polite smile. "The doll," she said, her brow furrowing. "Oh yes, I remember. Quite a find, that one. Been in the mansion for generations. Do you know anything about its history?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. Her smile faltered. "Well, there are stories, of course. Old houses like this, everything has a story." She led me to a small library, pulling out a dusty tome. "Here," she said, pointing to a faded photograph. "This was Abigail Schuyler in 1923. The doll belonged to her." I stared at the image, my blood turning to ice. It was the same photo I'd seen on my computer. The same little girl, the same doll. But now, looking closer, I noticed something that made my heart stop. The girl's eyes were glassy, unfocused. And her smile. It was an exact mirror of the doll's painted grin. "What happened to her?" I whispered. Mrs. Pendleton's voice dropped to a hush. "Poor child vanished without a trace. Some say she wandered into the woods behind the mansion. Others..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Others what?" I pressed. She looked around, as if afraid of being overheard. "Others say the doll took her, that it feeds on innocence, on youth. But that's just silly superstition, of course." I left the mansion with my mind reeling. Superstition or not, I knew one thing for certain. That doll was evil, and it was in my house. With my daughter. I broke every speed limit racing home. The house was quiet when I entered, too quiet. "Lily," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty halls. "Lily, where are you?" A giggle from upstairs sent me sprinting up the steps. I burst into Lily's room, my heart in my throat. She sat on her bed, the doll in her lap, brushing its hair. Both of them turned to look at me. Both of them smiled. "Hi, Daddy," Lily said, her voice oddly flat. "We've been waiting for you. Do you want to play with us?" I stood there, frozen in horror. Lily's eyes seemed glassy, unfocused, just like Abigail Schuyler's in that old photograph. And her smile. Oh God, her smile. It was an exact mirror of the doll's painted grin. "Lily, honey," put the doll down. My voice quavered, betraying the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. "We need to go." Now, Lily's head tilted at an unnatural angle, her glassy eyes never leaving mine. "But Daddy, we can't leave. She says the game is just beginning." A chill ran down my spine. "Who says, sweetheart?" Lily's smile widened, impossibly wide, stretching beyond the limits of her face. When she spoke again, it wasn't her voice. It was older, raspier, filled with malevolent glee. "I do, Daddy." Won't you play with us? I lunged forward, grabbing Lily and the doll. As my hands touched the porcelain, a jolt of electricity shot through me. Images flashed before my eyes. Dark woods, a child's scream, blood on snow, and always that damned smile. I blinked, disoriented. We were in the car, speeding down the highway. Lily sat silently in the back seat, the doll clutched to her chest. I had no memory of leaving the house, of buckling her in. How long had we been driving? "It's okay, Daddy," Lily said, her voice once again her own. "She says we're going to the right place." "Who says?" I demanded, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. But Lily had fallen silent again. Her eyes focused on something in the distance that I couldn't see. The sky darkened prematurely, angry clouds roiling overhead. Snow began to fall, thick and fast, obscuring the road. I squinted through the windshield, trying to make out where we were. The highway had given way to a narrow, winding road, dense forest pressing in on both sides. A sign loomed out of the whiteness. "Welcome to Schuyler Woods." My heart hammered in my chest. This was impossible. We'd been driving for less than an hour. There was no way we could have reached the outskirts of Albany, let alone the old Schuyler estate. "We're here, Daddy," Lily chirped from the back seat. "She says it's time to play." The car sputtered and died, rolling to a stop in front of a dilapidated gate. Beyond it, barely visible through the swirling snow, stood the dark silhouette of a mansion. It looked nothing like the well-preserved Schuyler mansion I'd visited earlier. This place was a ruin, a decaying monument to forgotten horrors. "Stay in the car, Lily," I ordered, unbuckling my seatbelt. "I mean it. Don't move." But as I stepped out into the howling wind, I saw her door open. Lily stepped out, the doll in her arms, and began walking towards the gate. It swung open at her approach, the rusted hinges shrieking in protest. "Lily, stop!" I shouted, my voice lost in the wind. I ran after her, but the snow seemed to thicken around me, slowing my progress. By the time I reached the gate, Lily had vanished into the gloom surrounding the mansion. The grounds were a nightmare of twisted topiary and crumbling statues. As I stumbled through the snow, I could have sworn I saw the stone figures move, their blank eyes following my desperate search. "Lily!" I screamed, my voice hoarse. "Lily, where are you?" A child's laughter echoed from within the mansion. I sprinted up the rotting steps, flinging open the front door. The interior was a maze of shadows and decay, wallpaper peeling like flayed skin, floorboards groaning beneath my feet. In the center of the foyer stood Lily, the doll held out before her like an offering. But something was wrong. Lily's form seemed to flicker like a faulty hologram. One moment, she was my 6-year-old daughter. The next, she was a girl in an old-fashioned dress, her face hidden by long, dark hair. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice choked with terror. The figure looked up, hair parting to reveal a face that was neither Lily nor the girl from the old photograph. It was a grotesque fusion of flesh and porcelain, human features melting into the doll's painted smile. "Don't you recognize me, Daddy?" It said, its voice a cacophony of Lily's innocence and something ancient and malevolent. "I'm everyone you've ever failed to protect. Everyone you've let slip away into the dark." The thing that was not Lily began to change, its form twisting and growing. The doll fell to the floor, lifeless once more, as the creature loomed over me. It was a patchwork nightmare of every fear I'd ever had, every guilt I'd ever carried. "You brought me here," it hissed, its breath hot and rotten against my face. "You invited me into your home, into your child's arms." And now the game is over. I've won. I scrambled backward, my back hitting the closed door. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare, a delusion. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up. The creature's hot, rotten breath seemed to sear my skin. I counted backwards from 10, a desperate attempt to cling to reality. 10, 9, 8. The fetid air grew colder, the oppressive silence of the mansion replaced by a steady, mechanical beeping. 7, 6, 5. The hard floor beneath me softened, transforming into something that cradled my body. 4, 3, 2. The beeping grew louder, more insistent. 1. I opened my eyes, gasping for air. The dim, sterile surroundings of a hospital room swam into focus. The beeping was coming from a heart monitor beside my bed. And 4 drip fed into my arm, and the medicinal smell of disinfectant filled my nostrils. Tom? Oh, thank God. Sarah's voice, thick with relief, came from beside me. I turned to see her, eyes red-rimmed from crying, clutching my hand. You're awake. We've been so worried. Sarah? My voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. What happened? Where's Lily? A look of confusion crossed Sarah's face. Lily's at home with my mother. Don't you remember? You've been here for 3 days. 3 days? My mind reeled, trying to make sense of it all. But the doll, the mansion, Sarah's brow furrowed with concern. Tom, there is no doll. You had a severe reaction to your new medication. The doctors said it might cause vivid hallucinations, but we never expected. She trailed off, squeezing my hand tighter. A doctor entered the room, a kind-faced woman with graying hair. Mr. Johnson, glad to see you're back with us. You gave us quite a scare. As she checked my vitals, she explained that I had been admitted after Sarah found me unresponsive at home. The new antidepressants I had started taking had interacted badly with my system, causing a psychotic episode. You've been in and out of consciousness, the doctor said. When you were awake, you were not yourself. You kept talking about a doll and a mansion. We had to sedate you a few times for your own safety. The relief I felt was overwhelming. Lily was safe. There was no doll, no mansion, no ancient evil. It had all been in my mind. But as Sarah and the doctor continued talking, discussing my treatment and recovery plan, a chill ran down my spine. In the corner of the room, barely visible in the shadows, I could have sworn I saw a small child-sized figure. And for just a moment, I heard a faint sing-song whisper. The game isn't over, Daddy. It's only just begun. I blinked, and the shadow was gone. But the unease remained, a seed of doubt planted in the fertile soil of my mind. Was I truly awake? Or was this just another layer of the nightmare? As Sarah hugged me, her tears of relief dampening my hospital gown, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, waiting, and smiling that terrible painted smile. The hospital discharged me after a week of observation and adjustment to my medication. The doctors assured me that the hallucinations were a rare side effect, unlikely to recur now that we'd found the right balance. But as Sarah drove us home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The familiar streets of Albany seemed subtly wrong, as if viewed through a funhouse mirror. Colors were too vivid, shadows too deep, and everywhere I looked, I saw dolls. In shop windows, in the arms of passing children, even perched on dashboard of cars we passed. Each one seemed to turn its head to watch us go by. You okay, Han? Sarah asked, her voice laced with concern. You're awfully quiet. I forced a smile. Just tired. Ready to be home. Home. The word should have brought comfort, but instead, it filled me with a nameless dread. As we pulled into our driveway, I saw Lily burst out of the front door, pigtails flying. My heart swelled at the sight of her, but then froze as I noticed what she was clutching to her chest. It was the doll. "Daddy," Lily cried, flinging herself into my arms as I stepped out of the car. "I missed you so much. Look what Grandma got me while you were away." She held up the doll proudly. It was identical to the one from my hallucinations, down to the last detail. The same painted smile, the same glassy eyes that seemed to follow my every move. That's nice, sweetheart," I managed, my mouth suddenly dry. "Why don't we go inside?" As we entered the house, I couldn't help but notice how the doll's head seemed to swivel, taking in its surroundings. But every time I looked directly at it, it was perfectly still. The next few days were a blur of forced normalcy. I tried to settle back into my routine, but sleep eluded me. Every night, I'd jolt awake at 3:33 a.m., convinced I'd heard childish laughter echoing through the house. But when I'd check on Lily, she'd be sound asleep, the doll sitting watch from her dresser. During the day, I'd catch glimpses of movement from the corner of my eye. The doll would be in different places each time I entered a room, though no one else seemed to notice. Sarah grew increasingly worried, urging me to talk to my therapist about these residual hallucinations. But were they hallucinations? The line between reality and nightmare grew blurrier with each passing day. It all came to a head one stormy night. I was in my study, trying to catch up on work I'd missed during my hospital stay. Thunder rattled the windows, and rain lashed against the glass. As lightning illuminated the room, I saw a small figure standing in the doorway. "Lily?" I called out, my voice trembling. "You should be in bed, sweetheart." The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, silhouetted against the darkness of the hallway. Another flash of lightning, and I saw it wasn't Lily at all. It was the doll, standing on its own, its painted smile somehow wider than ever. "This isn't real," I muttered, squeezing my eyes shut. "This isn't real." A small, cold hand touched my arm. My eyes flew open to see the doll now standing on my desk, its porcelain fingers gripping my wrist. "Oh, but it is real, Daddy," it said, its voice a horrifying mixture of Lily's innocence and something ancient and malevolent. "And the game is far from over." I recoiled, toppling backwards in my chair. As I scrambled to my feet, the doll was gone. But its laughter echoed through the house, mixing with the rumble of thunder. I ran to Lily's room, my heart pounding. She was there, sleeping peacefully. The doll sat on her dresser, exactly where it had been earlier. But as I watched, its head slowly turned to face me, that terrible smile mocking my fear. "Tom?" Sarah's voice came from behind me, heavy with sleep and worry. "What's going on?" I whirled to face her, words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "The doll, Sarah? It's alive. It's evil. We have to get rid of it. We have to protect Lily." Sarah's face crumpled in dismay. "Oh, Tom," she whispered. "I thought you were getting better." As she reached for her phone, presumably to call my doctor, I turned back to the dresser. The doll was gone. But in the mirror, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection. And behind me, just for a moment, I saw a small, child-sized figure. It raised a porcelain hand to its lips in a shushing gesture, its painted smile promising that our game was far from over. In that moment, I realized a chilling truth. The real horror wasn't the possibility that I was losing my mind. It was the possibility that I wasn't. The days that followed blurred into a nightmarish haze. Sarah insisted I increase my therapy sessions, convinced that I was suffering from some sort of post-traumatic stress. But how could I explain that every moment felt like walking on a tightrope over an abyss of madness? The doll was everywhere and nowhere. I'd catch glimpses of it in mirrors, reflections in windows, always just at the edge of my vision. But whenever I turned to look, it was gone. Lily carried it everywhere, oblivious to the malevolence I sensed emanating from its painted smile. One night, I woke to find Lily standing at the foot of our bed, the doll clutched to her chest. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice oddly flat. "She wants to play a game." Before I could respond, Sarah stirred beside me. "Tom? What's wrong?" I blinked, and Lily was gone. Had she ever been there at all? The next day, I found myself driving to the outskirts of Albany, to the real Schuyler mansion. I needed to see it, to prove to myself that it wasn't the decaying horror from my hallucinations. The mansion stood proud and well-preserved, nothing like the nightmare version I remembered. As I walked the manicured grounds, a tour guide approached me. "Interested in the history of the place?" she asked cheerfully. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "It's fascinating," she continued. "Did you know there are legends about a cursed doll associated with this mansion? They say it was owned by one of the Schuyler children, and that it, sir? Are you all right?" The world tilted sideways. I found myself on my knees, gasping for air. The tour guide's voice seemed to come from far away, distorted as if underwater. "Sir? Should I call someone?" I looked up at her, but it wasn't the tour guide anymore. It was the doll grown to human size, its porcelain features twisted into a grotesque parody of concern. "The game is almost over, Daddy," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers. "Are you ready for the final move?" I scrambled backwards, my fingers digging into the immaculately kept lawn. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not in broad daylight. I blinked, and the world snapped back into focus. The tour guide was kneeling beside me, her hand on my shoulder, real concern in her very human eyes. "Sir, I've called an ambulance. Just stay calm, okay?" But how could I stay calm when reality itself seemed to be unraveling around me? As the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance, I caught a glimpse of a small figure standing at the mansion's window. A child in an old-fashioned dress, holding a familiar doll. Both of them waved as the ambulance doors closed. The hospital was a flurry of tests and concerned doctors. Sarah arrived, her face a mask of worry and exhaustion. "Tom, please," she begged. "You have to fight this. For me, for Lily. We need you." I wanted to tell her I was fighting, that I'd been fighting all along, but the words wouldn't come. As night fell, the hospital room grew shadowy. In the dimness, I saw the doll sitting on the windowsill. "It's time to choose, Daddy," it said. "Stay here, in this half-life of doubt and fear, or come with me and learn the truth." I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. When I opened them, I'd made my decision. Thank you for listening. Now try to sleep.